It is Sunday, May 8th, and this is the Georgia Gang. A leak from the U.S. Supreme Court triggers an earthquake in abortion politics in Georgia and across the country. The Georgia High School Association wastes no time using its new legal authority to ban trans girls from girls' sports. And Trump's endorsement lifts a former never-Trumper to a primary victory in Ohio. Does it say anything about the former president's potential juice in Georgia? Phil, Martha, Melita, and Bobby are here today. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning. I'm Russ Spencer in for Lori Geary. The U.S. Supreme Court seems poised to rescind the constitutional right to abortion. A country that has fought over reproduction for 50 years is plumbing new depths of division, faced with a leaked draft opinion that would throw out Roe v. Wade, the 1973 ruling that legalized abortion. And reaction here has been swift.
Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back!
Protesters marched through downtown Atlanta to the state capitol this week, agitated by the prospect of the high court undoing 50 years of legalized abortion. Governor Kemp told the Georgia Gang's Martha Zoller he's upset by the leak, while taking credit for the 6-week abortion ban that's been blocked by the courts and would likely take effect if Roe v. Wade goes down.
But that doesn't change the fact that Georgia, by one vote, I might add, because of our hard work and really pushing and working with the General Assembly, passed the heartbeat bill.
Republican David Perdue told a crowd in East Georgia this week that if he were in charge, he'd go farther.
When that comes down, if I were governor, when that ruling comes down, I would call the General Assembly back in and ask them to eliminate all abortion in the state of Georgia.
Stacey Abrams, the presumed Democratic nominee for governor, released a statement saying, "As a woman, I'm enraged by the continued assault on our right to control our bodies and our futures. As an American, I'm appalled by the Supreme Court breach and its implications. As the next governor of Georgia, I will defend the right to an abortion and fight for reproductive justice." Well, the gang is here. Martha, we heard you had a chance to speak to the governor. Let's begin with you. What's your reaction to this apparently authentic leak, and how do you think it's going to impact Georgia politics?
Well, in full disclosure, I am the interim executive director for Georgia Life Alliance, so this is an important decision. This is what we've been working for a generation, to be able to get this decision back into the states. But I think there are two issues here. You know, a lot of people on the left say we're focusing too much on the leak, but I think interrupting or interfering with the deliberative process, this leaked document was from February. There's a lot of we don't know what the final decision is going to be. There could be a lot of things there. Right. But I do think that this is not completely unexpected, but we don't know what the final decision is going to be. But as far as the governor goes, he has a very strong record, not only on the heartbeat bill, but on Betsy's Law being passed, taking care of maternal care, expanding Medicaid for pregnant women, a lot of other bills that are related to not only life, but a culture of life in this state. So I think the governor's in a good position on this. All right.
Melita, your organization, Georgia's Wins List, essentially exists to promote women who favor reproductive rights to run for political office. What's your take on all of this?
Well, yes, and that is my full disclosure as well, that I work to elect pro-choice Democratic women. The bill, the so-called heartbeat bill, House Bill 481, passed with only one vote over the necessary 91 majority. We have since, with women who are pro-choice women candidates, flipped 3 House seats. We believe that there are other House seats which might well flip again in 2022. And so I believe you will see Democrats working to rescind House Bill 481 and come to a different agreement about what Georgia's abortion laws should be. Martha and I talked in a phone call just in the last 24 hours. Georgia has a surprisingly liberal position on reproductive freedom going back to the days even before Roe v. Wade. There was a time when Georgia had more liberal abortion laws than some of the states in the Northeast. People are real surprised when they hear that, but all of us were mere babies when that was happening.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Well, that's interesting. Well, Phil, I'm interested in your reaction to that, and to David Perdue having said that if he is elected governor, he would call a special session and try to ban abortion completely.
Well, let me just give a broader perspective to what Melita was saying. This is now an all 50 state issue. Abortion is not ending. There's a lot of misinformation and political smoke that's going on. So I think this is constitutionally correct. I disagree about there's a constitutional right to abortion. Obviously, abortion is not mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. So we are doing constitutionally what's right according to the justices that have done this draft. So in Georgia, yes, it would be up to the legislature. And to your point, Russ, it is a game changer perhaps for I know we're going to get into the polling in a few minutes, but I think it could be a game changer in the Republican primary as to how both the candidates, Governor Kemp and his challenger, former Senator David Perdue, are handling this and how that's going to be received. Now, I think it's interesting. And polling is tricky. It's all, as we all know, it's all in how you ask the question. But I think the vast majority of pollsters have found this, that to some degree, a large majority of Americans and a large majority of Georgians want restrictions on abortion. Now, how that would play out in a legislature, we do not know.
Yeah.
But to his point about the polling, 68% of Georgians did not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned, and as many as 72% nationally did not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. So yes, it is which poll and what the questions were to have widely.
Do they understand what it means when Roe v. Wade is taken down? I don't think they do.
Well, it would go back to the states. To his point, obviously abortion is not mentioned in the Constitution, but neither is gay marriage or contraception. Bobby, how do you see all this playing out?
Well, look, I think importantly, you just pointed out what's going to happen now. Because of what has happened at the federal level, assuming this stands and Roe versus Wade is overturned, this is going to go back to the states. And all of a sudden, these governor's races, Stacey Abrams' race for governor, the state house races, the state senate races become supremely important in deciding the future and fate of women in the state of Georgia. And if I'm Stacey Abrams, I am happy to have a discussion about the heartbeat bill with Governor Kemp if he ends up being the nominee, because that is, as Melita pointed out, 68% of people in Georgia do not back that. And I'm telling you right now, this is not what Governor Kemp's political team would want going into an election.
But will Stacey Abrams bring her position that she made this week, that abortion should be legal up until birth? That is a radical position that well over 80% of Georgians and Americans disagree with.
I just think this being a state issue is not good for Republicans in Georgia, and it is probably, it's bigger than politics, obviously.
One other real short statement. We've just been through a pandemic where we had lots of decisions about health care. And in most cases, it was determined that health care decisions should be decided on the state level, not on the federal level. That's really the umbrella that this one is under.
It's also the most democratic way to do this. Give it back to the states. And yes, the radicalism of the Democrats is a problem because, as Martha has pointed out, there can be nuances, there can be compromises on these abortion bills in all 50 states. But I mean, you don't want to take a hardline left-wing position.
Well, women are going to continue to have abortions. Are you at all concerned about poor women having to travel hundreds upon hundreds of miles to get beyond their part of the country?
They're already doing that. There are no abortion clinics in rural areas now. Okay, so if you live, 5 hours from a major city, you're already doing that.
Melita, what do you say?
That's very true. The wealthy women, the wives, girlfriends, and yes, even mistresses of wealthy men will always have access to abortion. We have to be concerned about the poor women who might not have the same access. The other thing is, this Alito opinion quotes a British aristocrat from the 1600s who believed in executing witches and thought that marital rape was not a crime.
Yeah. So well, wait a minute. Now that doesn't reflect what the draft says. I mean,
but it reflects the opinions of the man he's quoting.
Well, he was also saying that it's a states' rights issue. That's why we elect, going back to our original topic, state legislators, and they deal with these issues, Russ, like the one you brought up with poor women. What about the cases of the life of the mother when that's at stake, or rape or incest? All these will be debated in all 50 states.
I just think this opens a huge can of worms too at the federal federal level. I'm sorry, but if you're going to start overturning precedent that is several decades old, that these judges all stood before Congress and said that they believed in stare decisis and they believed in precedent and they lied through their teeth.
Alito says that this is a correction of a mistake. Even your hero, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the former late Supreme Court justice, said this was constructed the wrong way in 1973.
All right. One thing we can all agree on, I think, is that however you come down on this particular issue, it's time to start paying attention to who we elect as state senators and state representatives, and a lot of us haven't done that up until this point. We have really new numbers in the governor's race that I know you're going to want to see, so stay with us. We'll have that when we come back after this.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Brian Kemp and David Perdue squared off for their third and final debate last weekend. Matt Towery, our pollster, said the debate had all the excitement of a tax audit. Let's take a look at the numbers. A new Fox 5 Insider Advantage poll has Brian Kemp at 54%, David Perdue at 38%. The question is, does he avoid a runoff? Let's bring the panel back. And I know, Phil, that you're privy to some new information from Matt Towery that suggests this is getting closer.
Well, that's right. A week ago, the Insider Advantage Fox 5 poll had Governor Kemp at 54% and David Perdue was at 38%. And Matt Towery now has been tracking it right up to today. And there is a bump up, especially with regard to the abortion ruling that we're talking about, and both the GOP candidates are staking out their positions. But Matt Towery and other pollsters looked at the Ohio GOP primary the other day. And it's interesting. I don't know how it will impact Georgia. I have to say that right up front. I don't know. But there was a hidden Trump bump. What I mean by that is, for the Trump-endorsed candidates, the pollsters missed about 5% of people that don't respond to pollsters, but they went out and voted for the Trump-endorsed candidates, and then the Trump-endorsed candidates did very well. I think they swept all of the GOP primaries. Will that happen in Georgia? I don't know, but the race, Russ, is in flux.
You're referring specifically to J.D. Vance, who was behind.
Or as President Trump calls him, J.D. Mandel.
Mandel, right.
J.P. Mandel.
It didn't seem to matter because he came from behind and he won, and he said when he accepted that he knew that the fake news media didn't want him to win and wanted this to be the nail in Trump's coffin.
So it may be Perdue is coming up a little bit.
One wonders.
But if Ohio were playing by Georgia rules, J.D. Vance received only 32.2% of the vote, Josh Mandel 23.9% of the vote. So Ohio would be having a runoff if they operated the way we do. So I'm not sure you can read quite so much into those Ohio results since Georgia has a runoff system.
What do you think?
You know, I think that your point is good about the runoff, because we do have a runoff situation. I do think the race, of course, is going to get tighter as we get closer, but I still have the sense that Brian Kemp stays above 50%, and I think that he'll win without a runoff. But there's going to be a lot of issues. There's a lot of undecided. I agree with you about this Trump bump, Phil, because I don't believe there's 50% undecided in the lieutenant governor's race. Even though it's, quote, a down ballot race, I think we've got a lot of people that just aren't saying what they're going to do.
Can I just point out one thing about the results in Ohio, and that Trump bump may be real in the Republican primary of the 5 points or whatnot. But keep in mind, Peter Thiel came in and spent $10 million in that race to bump and boost J.D. Vance as well. So that's like, I don't see $10 million coming in for David Perdue in Georgia from Peter Thiel either.
Well, I would actually agree with you on that point, but the PACs now have another couple weeks to kick in. There's more money that have gone into the Trump and Perdue PACs. I do think that right now Governor Kemp is the slight favorite. That's what the tracking is showing. All I'm saying is that the race is in flux. And also the polling shows that the minor candidates in the gubernatorial race are polling around 5 or 6%, which that goes back to that magic 50% plus one.
Okay, let's talk about the Secretary of State races here in Georgia. Brad Raffensperger and Jody Hice went at it over the weekend. Let's take a look at that.
Ballot drop-off boxes were not legal until after Brad made them.
No, you have to read the code. They're in there.
No, Brad.
I've read the code. You haven't.
No, listen.
If you read the code, you'll see it.
Did we have ballot drop-off boxes before?
Were allowed by
did we have them
the Liberals
before?
were going to use
the
those.
The answer is no.
No, the Liberals were going to put them in their counties, and because it was allowed by state law.
We've never had drop-off boxes until Brad Raffensperger.
It was a middle of a pandemic, and that's why the Liberals were going to put them in their counties.
Excuse me, this is my time, Brad.
Okay, one of them is going to be the Republican nominee for Secretary of State. What do you make of the contest on the Democratic side? They also had a debate.
Well, we have endorsed Bee Nguyen, who I believe is the front runner in that race, and I believe she would bode well. Her chances would be really high against either of the GOP nominees. I think we were just talking about polling, and what I don't think any of the polling shows is when you have Democrats perhaps pulling ballots to vote in this Secretary of State race on the Republican side to show favoritism to Raffensperger perhaps, then how do they vote in the governor's race? How do they vote in the lieutenant governor's race? Because when you're only polling prior Republican voters, you're not picking up how those Democrats who are pulling Republican ballots are going to vote.
We have seen an uptick of that in the 9th district, but overwhelmingly these huge turnouts. I mean, we have got, you know, the 2018 numbers for early voting are just being shattered, okay? And even in the absentee ballots, with all the issues of changing the rules, you've got this new terminology. I'm sure you've noticed it. You know, received and accepted, which means that it's kind of gone through some sort of check already, and those numbers are off the charts. Now, granted, if you compare them to 2020, it's a little different, but I don't know if you can compare any election to 2020. You got to compare it to the midterm election that we were up against.
Yeah, these early voting totals, I don't know what to make of them right now for the same reason, because you had absentee ballots going out in high numbers in 2020 because of the pandemic. Everything has been upended in the last 3 years that we know about how to cast a ballot for an election. So I don't see that we can make anything of it until after we step back and look.
But early voting is good for Republicans.
Well, early voting, that's right. I was going to say there's more Republican ballots as we tape right now than Democrat. Now, obviously, there's another couple
also
weeks.
in the first back, all we can measure against is 2018.
Yeah, my point is that I think that the vote, there's a heavier vote now, and I think that both sides are obviously pushing for turnout. But I do think that there's a Democratic malaise here. I think that the problem is with high inflation, with high grocery prices, high gasoline prices, it's going to be taken out. And this is going on all over the country, according to polling. They do not like, voters do not like what they see in the grocery store and the gas pump, and this is going to hurt the Democrats in Georgia.
Okay.
Well, I think the abortion decision may well reignite those people who might have been holding back.
Okay. Democrats and Republicans very concerned about immigration. Democrats expressing concern about what happens. Is the administration prepared when Title 42 goes away at the end of this month and there's a predicted surge? We'll talk about that when we come back after this break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
All right, let's talk about immigration. Democrats are pressuring the administration ahead of the planned lifting of Title 42, which allows for immediate deportation of people crossing the border because of COVID concerns. Georgia U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff questioned a regional FEMA administrator this week about the expected surge of migrants this summer.
If you're not prepared, what's it going to take to get prepared? Because my constituents lack confidence that sufficient preparation is ongoing and that the administration is prepared. So if you're not prepared, what do you need?
Well, sir, I would not say that we are not prepared. What I would say is that we are preparing.
It sounds like they're not prepared, but based on what she's saying there, and that they probably need more money. You expressed concern about this particular issue. How do you see this?
Well, you know, Senator Jon Ossoff is always a very even-keeled guy, and so that's about as angry as you're ever going to see him when he says, my constituents do not have confidence in what you're telling us. That is a major statement to be made. And so I think it's very important. I think you're seeing more and more Democrats saying, wait a minute, we cannot have this policy of don't believe your lying eyes. You have the administration and Mayorkas getting out there, Secretary Mayorkas getting out there and saying the border is secure, and anybody can look anytime and see that that's not the case. So I think that what you're seeing is more and more Democrats that are saying, wait a minute, I think we need to hold off on this. And I don't know if they're just so bullheaded that they're going to go forward with it at the end of the month no matter what, but I would reconsider if I were them.
Yeah, in that same discussion, Senator Ossoff said, look, you know, we're very concerned that we know who's coming into this country, and you know,
and if
Democrats
you
are worried about this.
you don't have sovereignty.
Exactly. From a political standpoint, this is difficult for the Democrats in the fall.
Well, look, I think this is an issue of good governance, and it should be a nonpartisan issue, and Senator Ossoff obviously believes it to be that way as well. I think the important thing here is that if we're going to make policy changes, and this always goes for a Democratic or Republican administration, whenever we make policy changes, we got to make sure we're getting it right, and we've got to make sure that we're prepared for the change and the consequences that comes. I mean, that is just common sense. We send all these people to Washington with an R or a D behind their name. The fact is, we send them there to do the work, and it's good to see him standing up for Georgia.
Well, I think
well, wait a minute. We're not even enforcing the law. This bureaucrat is telling Senator Ossoff we're prepared. Yeah, they're prepared to continue catch and release. That's what the Biden administration is doing right now. It is a national scandal that over 1 million illegal aliens have come in since Biden was inaugurated. In fact, these are unconfirmed reports, I have to say it. But I even understand that there are illegals being dumped into Georgia now, along with all these other states. You hear reports all the time. They're swamping schools, healthcare systems, et cetera, et cetera. This is a worse scandal, and Warnock and Ossoff, our senators, have been going right along with it. And now they realize, oh, wait, we're in trouble because of the midterms and what's happening. What a joke.
But most Americans think that people from Central and South America and the rest of the world ought to have a right to petition for asylum in the U.S.
But let's do what Trump did, which was a common sense policy, and let's have the asylum seekers stay outside the border. And that worked for 4 years. And even a lot of Democrats are coming around, forget Trump, we need to have that asylum fixed.
Malia?
Well, I was going to point out that I think this video we just saw showcases Ossoff's talents as a former investigative journalist and documentarian, because he's saying, what are your unmet requirements? How do you measure your success? He's trying to put things in the record. And I think that's an interesting way to look at his performance as a senator, and he's applying those same skills to looking at military housing and the underperformance of how our U.S. military families are treated on bases.
Okay, we've got about 1.5 minutes left. Maybe the two of you could split it. Talking about, or we could go down the line, the Georgia High School Association using its new authority to say that trans girls cannot compete in sports against girls in Georgia.
You know, as a person who was the only woman in a lot of situations when I first entered the workforce, this issue is very important to me because girls' sports we fought really hard for. And so I agree with what GHSA has done, and I think we've got to figure out what more to do, but I think that we've got to protect girls' sports.
Melita, the Republican governor in Utah, vetoed a similar bill saying it would have applied to 4 trans girls, and he wasn't going to pass a bill that picked on 4 people.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the law asked the High School Association to conduct a study before making a ruling. They ignored that part of the law, which I believe opens the state, the association, whomever, up to lawsuits. And I think this is something that will now be decided by the courts because the High School Association didn't follow the law and have the study that the law recommended.
They did do telephone calling, and they did find out what the sentiment was, and it is fairness. That is the big issue here.
All right. Winners and losers are next. We'll be right back.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, ladies first. Why don't we begin with you, Martha?
Well, I'm going to start off with a happy birthday to my mother-in-law. She turned 90 this weekend, and so she always celebrates her birthday with Mother's Day, like you do. Myra Meeksaller. And
happy birthday, Myra.
Yeah, so she's doing great, and we're looking forward to celebrating that. And my winner this week is the Democratic staffer who scrubbed birthing person out of the bill they're going to vote on next week related to codifying Roe v. Wade. You know, when you have an 80-year-old man controlling policy, and I'm talking about Chuck Schumer, you make mistakes like that. And then the loser this week is that person who is doxing the Supreme Court justices and putting their addresses on line and then paying people to come and protest to their house.
Bobby?
My loser for this week is every woman in the state of Georgia. If this opinion holds on Roe versus Wade, they will be the losers in this, and the amount of privacy they're going to lose with their doctors and decision making is going to be gone. Winner, let's go uplifting. It's Mother's Day. It's all the mothers out there. Come on, you guys make the world go round. So thank you for everything you all do.
We agree. Phil?
Yeah, actually, the winners, we all agree on something here. Mothers, winners. Also, the Georgia State Lottery is the winner. They had a great first quarter. I think it was their almost second best time. They're almost hitting the $25 billion mark for all of the money that the state has gathered for the Hope Scholarships and for pre-K. So they're the winners. And yes, sorry, Melita, but I think we have to have fairness in women's sports, and you have to have competition by the gender of your birth.
All right, Melita, we got a little bit more than a minute left, so take your time.
Well, my first winner is Secretary of State candidate Bee Nguyen, who, with full disclosure, is endorsed by WinList. She received the Emily's List, a national award, the Gabrielle Giffords Award in Washington earlier this week. And it's appropriate during a week leading up to Mother's Day that she gave a very moving tribute to her mother, applauding her bravery as she escaped Vietnam and all the sacrifices she made to raise 5 daughters. So find that speech on YouTube. It'll give you a Mother's Day smile no matter what party you're from. And then during this segment, we often acknowledge the loss of someone in the community, and I wish to express condolences to the family, especially the 4 children of Gwinnett County Tax Commissioner Tiffany Porter, who died this week of breast cancer at the age of 43, a loss far too young. She was a trailblazer and inspiration to many women. And then I think all of us who love Babettes are losers because they closed their doors on Sunday evening after almost 30 years in business.
All right, you get the last word. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. Lori will be back next weekend. Fox News Sundays next.